The storm raged across the mountains, an unrelenting tempest that seemed to echo the chaos brewing within the decrepit halls of Blackthorn Castle. Lightning illuminated the crumbling stone walls as Victor, a lone sorcerer draped in a tattered black cloak, moved methodically through the circular chamber. Ancient symbols were etched into the floor, glowing faintly as he chanted in a forgotten tongue. The air grew colder with each syllable, and the flickering of the torches cast elongated shadows that danced like restless spirits. Victor's breath fogged as he paused, wiping sweat from his brow despite the icy air. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the weight of the ritual. Tonight, he would summon powers that had been lost to legend, powers he barely comprehended but desperately needed. The stakes were monumental. An entity of darkness, ancient and insatiable, was stirring in the depths of the world. Victor, consumed by a blend of ambition and desperation, sought champions who could face such a threat. A deafening crack of thunder shook the chamber as the runes erupted in fiery light. The summoning circle flared, and from its center, shadows coalesced into a form both regal and menacing. Dracula emerged, his crimson cloak billowing, as if caught in an ethereal wind. His pale skin shimmered in the torchlight, and his eyes burned like embers beneath his dark brows. He stood tall, exuding an air of arrogance and command that matched the legends whispered about him. Victor staggered backward as Dracula's gaze locked onto him. "You dare summon me?" Dracula's voice was smooth yet edged with venom. "Do you know what it is you meddle with, mortal?" "I know," Victor replied, though his voice trembled. "I have not called you lightly, Count. A great darkness stirs, one that threatens both your kind and mine. I offer you a chance to reclaim the power that time has taken from you, to stand once again as the master of the night." Dracula's lips curved into a faint smirk, though his eyes remained cold. "A tempting offer, but your mortal schemes do not concern me. Why should I bother with this darkness you speak of? The world has always been rife with such things." Before Victor could respond, the summoning circle ignited again, its brilliance rivaling the lightning outside. The air grew heavy, carrying the acrid scent of burnt metal, as another figure took shape, taller and broader than Dracula. This figure was a patchwork of scars and stitches, bound together by unnatural force. Frankenstein's monster stepped forward, his gait heavy and deliberate. His mismatched eyes surveyed the chamber with suspicion, and his massive hands clenched as if ready for battle. "Where am I?" the monster rumbled, his voice low and guttural. He turned toward Victor, his expression a mix of anger and confusion. "What have you done, sorcerer? Why am I here?" Victor swallowed hard, feeling the weight of their combined presence. "You have been summoned because your strength is needed. A darkness approaches that none can face alone. You, forged from death itself, and you, Count Dracula, Lord of the Undead. Together, you may have a chance to stop it." The monster's gaze shifted to Dracula, who regarded him with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. "This is your solution?" Dracula asked, his tone dripping with derision. "You summon a brute stitched together from corpses to stand at my side? Do you mock me?" The monster's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer to Dracula, his immense form towering over the vampire. "Call me a brute again, leech, and I'll tear you apart," he growled. Dracula's smirk returned, but his fangs glinted this time. "You're welcome to try." Victor raised his hands, his voice cutting through the rising tension. "Enough! If you wish to survive what's coming, you'll need to put aside your differences. The entity that stirs in the abyss is unlike anything you faced. It is older than time and hungrier than death itself. Alone, you are doomed. Together, you might have a chance." The chamber fell silent, save for the distant roar of the storm. The monster and Dracula regarded each other warily, the animosity between them tangible. But Victor's words lingered, a grim reminder of the stakes. "What do you gain from this, mortal?" Dracula asked, turning his piercing gaze back to Victor. Victor hesitated before answering, his expression hardening. "The same thing you seek, survival. And power. The monster grunted, his expression skeptical. You speak of survival, but you gamble with forces you don't understand. If this fails, it'll be your head I come for first. Victor nodded, accepting the threat without flinching. Then we are agreed. Dracula's smirk faded, and he extended a pale hand. The monster hesitated before doing the same, their hands meeting in an uneasy pact. The circle glowed one final time, sealing their agreement. But as the light dimmed, Victor's expression shifted, a flicker of something darker passing through his eyes. Unnoticed by his summoned champions, the sorcerer's fingers traced a hidden rune on his staff, a contingency for the betrayal he already anticipated. For now, the alliance was formed and the stage was set. Darkness loomed, and the storm outside showed no signs of abating. The castle halls were quiet, save for the occasional drip of water from cracked stone ceilings. Victor led Dracula and the monster through the shadowed corridors, a trio bound together by necessity rather than trust. Each step echoed with tension, their alliance strained even before it had truly begun. The sorcerer paused before a heavy oak door, its surface inscribed with protective runes that glowed faintly under the torchlight. "This chamber holds what you'll need for the journey ahead," he said, pushing the door open. Inside, the room was a workshop of forgotten wonders. Shelves overflowed with ancient tomes and relics. Strange vials glimmered with liquids that pulsed like living things. At the center stood a table bearing two objects of undeniable power. The first was a sword, its blade forged from an unearthly black metal that seemed to devour the light around it. Runes danced along its surface, faintly whispering in a language none of them recognized. The second was a gauntlet, massive and intricately designed, its plates etched with symbols that radiated raw energy. These relics were crafted to combat the darkness, Victor explained, his voice reverent. The sword, Nightfang, is said to sever even the essence of immortality. The gauntlet, Titan's grasp, can channel immense power, but demands strength of will to wield. Dracula approached the table, his crimson cloak billowing. His fingers hovered over the blade, eyes narrowing as he felt its dormant energy. "A fine weapon," he murmured, "though I have rarely needed one." The monster stepped forward, eyeing the gauntlet. Its size and weight seemed a natural fit for his massive frame, but his expression remained wary. "What's the cost?" he asked gruffly. Victor's gaze lingered on the relics. "The cost is only what you're willing to pay. These tools will amplify your power, but demand your resolve. Hesitation will destroy you." Dracula smirked. "Power always comes at a price. I am no stranger to such bargains." He grasped the hilt of Nightfang, and the blade seemed to pulse in recognition, its dark aura enveloping him briefly before settling. The monster hesitated before slipping his hand into the gauntlet. The plates adjusted to his massive fingers, locking into place with a sound like a closing vault. Energy coursed through him, causing his stitched muscles to ripple with newfound strength. Victor nodded approvingly. "Now, you are equipped for what lies ahead. But be warned. The darkness will not merely oppose you. It will corrupt and tempt you. Trust in these relics, but more importantly, trust in your purpose." The trio departed the workshop, but mistrust lingered between them. Dracula's eyes flicked toward the monster as if measuring his worth, while the monster grunted, clearly uneasy about the vampire's presence. Their journey took them into the Blackwood, an ancient forest that seemed to breathe malevolence. The trees loomed like skeletal sentinels, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky. The deeper they ventured, the darker the air grew, until even Dracula's enhanced senses faltered. "This place reeks of death," the monster muttered, his voice low. "And yet you feel at home, don't you?" Dracula replied with a sneer. The monster snarled but restrained himself, focusing instead on the path ahead. Victor halted abruptly, raising his hand. "We are not alone," he warned. The ground trembled as shadows coalesced, forming grotesque creatures with elongated limbs and jagged teeth. Their eyes burned like embers, and their movements were unnaturally fluid, as though the laws of nature had no hold on them. The first attack came swiftly. A creature lunged at Dracula, who moved within human speed, his sword cleaving through its form with effortless precision. The blade drank in the creature's essence, growing darker with each kill. The monster roared, swinging his gauntlet fist into another creature. The impact sent it hurtling into a tree, where it dissolved into ash. The gauntlet pulsed, and arcs of energy leapt from its surface, striking down several more. Victor stood at the center of the fray, his staff radiating protective wards that shielded him from harm. He chanted incantations, casting bolts of light that disintegrated the remaining creatures. As the battle subsided, Dracula sheathed Nightfang, his eyes narrowing at Victor. "You neglected to mention these abominations. They are but a taste of what we face," Victor replied. "The darkness sends its scouts to test our strength. Clearly, we pass." The monster growled, flexing his gauntlet hand. "Next time, warn us." "I don't enjoy being ambushed." The group pressed on, their path growing more treacherous. Victor's warnings became more frequent, his voice carrying a tension that even Dracula noticed. "You're hiding something," the vampire said as they reached a clearing where the air felt unnaturally still. Victor hesitated before speaking. "The relics you wield are not merely tools. They are bound to the darkness itself. Their power comes from the enemy we face. If you falter, they will turn on you." The monster glared at the sorcerer. "And you're telling us this now? After we've used them?" Dracula chuckled darkly. "It seems our dear sorcerer is not entirely trustworthy." Before Victor could respond, the ground beneath them shifted. The clearing collapsed into a cavern, plunging them into darkness. They landed in a subterranean chamber, its walls pulsating as if alive. A voice, deep and resonant, filled the chamber. "You bring my own weapons against me, sorcerer? How amusing." The entity appeared as a massive, shifting mass of shadow and flame. Its presence was suffocating, its voice dripping with malice. Victor stepped forward, his staff glowing. "We are here to end your reign, Abyssal One." The entity laughed, a sound that shook the chamber. "You think your fragile alliances can defeat me? I have lived through eons and devoured worlds. You will join them." Dracula and the monster readied their weapons, but the Abyssal One's tendrils lashed out, striking with overwhelming force. Dracula was flung across the chamber, and the monster's gauntlet flickered as he struggled to hold his ground. Victor's staff emitted a blinding light, pushing back the darkness momentarily. "Strike now!" he shouted. Dracula's sword glowed as he launched himself at the entity, slashing through its tendrils with supernatural precision. The monster followed, his gauntlet discharging energy that tore into the entity's form. But as they fought, Dracula's movements became erratic. The sword's influence was taking hold, filling him with bloodlust. The monster noticed and shouted, "Control yourself, vampire, or you'll doom us all." Dracula snarled, his eyes glowing as he turned toward the monster. The alliance was fraying, even as the darkness loomed larger. Victor watched in silence, his hand subtly tracing another rune on his staff. The chamber shuddered as the Abyssal One drew itself to its full monstrous height, its form a writhing amalgam of darkness, flame, and tendrils that defied physical logic. Its voice echoed through the subterranean cavern, more felt than heard, a malevolent force that promised ruin. "Your struggle amuses me," the Abyssal One said, its tone dripping with contempt. "You wield the weapons forged from my essence, yet you think they can harm me. You are as foolish as the countless others who have fallen before me." Victor steadied himself, his staff glowing faintly as it absorbed ambient energy. He cast a glance toward Dracula, who gripped Nightfang with visible tension, the sword's aura pulsating as if alive. The monster stood nearby, his gauntlet sparking with residual energy, his massive frame taut with readiness. "Do not listen to its words," Victor warned, his voice firm. "It seeks to sow discord among us. We must strike as one, or we are doomed." Dracula's crimson eyes flickered toward Victor, suspicion etched into his features. "And how do we know this isn't another one of your manipulations, sorcerer? You've been less than forthcoming from the start." The monster growled lowly, his patience fraying. "We don't have time for this. Whatever your quarrel, it ends now. Focus, both of you." The abyssal one seized the moment, its tendrils lashing out with blinding speed. Victor raised the staff, creating a barrier of light that absorbed the brunt of the attack. Dracula leaped aside, moving with inhuman agility, while the monster slammed his gauntlet into the ground, sending a shockwave that disrupted the tendrils' momentum. The battle erupted in full. Dracula moved like a specter, his strikes with Nightfang precise and lethal. Each swing of the blade carved through the abyssal one's form, the sword's dark energy temporarily severing the creature's mass. But with each strike, Dracula felt the weapon's pull, an insidious whisper promising ultimate power if he surrendered to its will. The monster waded into the fray, his gauntlet crackling with energy as he delivered devastating blows. His sheer strength was a force of nature, each punch creating ripples in the abyssal one's shifting body. Yet, for all his might, the gauntlet's power began to exact a toll, its energy seeping into him, threatening to overwhelm his mind. Victor remained the anchor, weaving spells that kept the abyssal one at bay. He chanted incantations in a language older than the stars, his staff a beacon of light in the oppressive darkness. But even he was faltering, the sheer magnitude of the entity testing his limits. The abyssal one's laughter filled the chamber. "You fight valiantly, but you cannot win. My power is infinite, and your resolve is fleeting. You will break, as all who came before you have." Dracula snarled, his grip on Nightfang tightening. "I am not so easily broken, beast. I have faced eternity and conquered it." The monster, breathing heavily, added, "And I've endured worse than you can imagine. Your threats are meaningless." Victor's voice cut through their defiance. "It feeds on our arrogance. We must act together. Now." But the cracks in their alliance were widening. Dracula hesitated, the sword's whispers growing louder. It promised him victory, power, and dominion over all if he claimed the abyssal one's essence for himself. The temptation was nearly unbearable, his vampiric nature drawn to the darkness like a moth to flame. The monster noticed Dracula's faltering and shouted, "Focus, vampire. If you lose yourself now, you'll doom us all." Dracula turned to the monster, his eyes glowing with a mix of fury and inner conflict. "You think you can command me, creature? Do not presume to understand my struggle." The abyssal one capitalized on their discord, its tendrils coiling around the monster and lifting him into the air. The gauntlet flared wildly as the monster roared, struggling against the crushing force. Victor acted swiftly, channeling energy through his staff and severing the tendrils with a concentrated burst of light. The monster fell to the ground, battered but alive. "Enough!" Victor bellowed, his voice echoing with authority. "This is exactly what it wants. You must resist its influence, or we are all lost." Dracula closed his eyes, forcing himself to silence the sword's whispers. When he reopened them, his resolve was steeled. "You're right. For now, we fight as one." The three aligned once more, their combined assault a symphony of light, shadow, and raw power. Dracula's strikes became more controlled, each swing of Nightfang cutting deeper into the abyssal one's essence. The monster, fueled by sheer willpower, unleashed devastating blows with the gauntlet, its energy synchronizing with his movements. Victor, despite his exhaustion, summoned a final spell. He drew a sigil in the air, its light piercing the oppressive darkness. "This is our moment," he shouted. "Strike now, with all you have." Dracula and the monster charged simultaneously, their weapons glowing with the combined energy of their determination. Dracula drove Nightfang deep into the abyssal one's core, the blade's runes blazing as it consumed the creature's essence. The monster followed with a thunderous punch, the gauntlet discharging a blinding surge of energy that shattered the abyssal one's form. The entity let out a final, ear-splitting roar as it began to collapse in on itself, its essence spiraling into Nightfang. The chamber quaked violently, the walls crumbling as the darkness dissipated. Victor collapsed to his knees, his staff dimming. Dracula withdrew the blade, now pulsating with an ominous light. The monster leaned against the cavern wall, his breaths labored but victorious. "It is done," Victor said weakly, his voice filled with relief. Dracula looked at the sword, its power now undeniable. He turned to Victor and the monster, a faint smirk playing on his lips. Perhaps this alliance was not entirely in vain. The monster grunted. "Don't get used to it, vampire. Once we leave this place, we go our separate ways." Victor nodded, though his eyes lingered on Nightfang. The relics must be destroyed. Their power is too dangerous to remain in this world. Dracula's smirk faded. Perhaps, but that is a decision for another time. As the trio made their way out of the collapsing chamber, the weight of their journey settled over them. The darkness had been defeated, but the scars it left behind, both physical and emotional, would endure. Above them, the night sky stretched infinitely, a stark reminder that even in victory, the battle against darkness was never truly over.